Back to week 5 of no, it's week 6. They're already running together of the Yahoo Q&A here at what other Yahoo. As always, I'm your host, John Daigle of Establish the Run, here to answer a few questions. But at the top of the show, I always begin with an overarching view of what happened on Thursday, if there were any takeaways, not to mention a couple buys and sells, because that's all people love. It's the low-hanging fruit. So let's begin with what happened with Skattebo last night. And I know some people think maybe this is the time to then trade him away after a terrific 3-touchdown performance and a big win over the Eagles. And I don't think that's the case. There were leagues where even I sat him and not even upset about it at all. I have to make those decisions all the time, so I don't ever get worried about it once you do the process. But we're talking about an Eagles defense with Tyrone Tracy coming back. So we just didn't know the timeshare or if it'd be a committee whatsoever. And instead, even with Tyrone Tracy back, we got a season high 88% of backfield touches for Skattebo. For reference, his previous season high was just the last game without Tyrone Tracy, and it was only 75%. So this is how a rookie or a player in general who earns an opportunity then keeps that opportunity moving forward. It's odd that it came with Tyrone Tracy back being active, but 3 touchdowns, over 100 yards from scrimmage, that's how Skattebo stays in the field. So am I looking to trade away Skattebo after that game? No. I have a lot more confidence in him now moving forward, and in fact, want to hold him instead. So Skattebo, a big winner from last night. A player I am looking to move, despite their terrific performance, is none other than Ja'Marr Chase. Because think about what we experienced the past 2 games before Chase exploded for 110 yards and 2 touchdowns against the Lions. And that was a player that everyone came to this chat and didn't even want to start. It was horrific in that he had single-digit fantasy points in both games and then blew up for 29 from Jake Browning, his second most fantasy points in any start with Browning. And now we go to Joe Flacco, who the hype is allowing Chase to be traded for more than he's worth, and that's what I'm taking advantage of. We're obviously not expecting 29 fantasy points weekly from Ja'Marr Chase, nor are we expecting him to be a consistent top 12 wide receiver without Joe Burrow the rest of the season. So that alone in name value makes it best to move off of him so we don't have to deal with what we dealt with in the Vikings and Broncos matchups, for example. Not only that, but these next 2 games for Joe Flacco and the Bengals project similarly. They mirror the matchups we projected for the Broncos and Vikings as 2 that you don't want to start Joe Flacco, and the Bengals offense, including the passing attack, will struggle. Joe Flacco, for reference, only Aaron Rodgers has a worse EPA per dropback under pressure than Flacco this year. And the next 2 matchups for the Bengals are the Packers and the Steelers, who rank 9th and 11 in generating pressure. It's going to be another miserable experience for the Bengals passing game and Joe Flacco in particular. And so now, off of those 2 touchdowns, we have a window to get away from Ja'Marr Chase. And so I definitely want to do that wherever possible. I know for a fact, again, based on name value, you can easily start or flip, I should say, Chase for a couple of different wide receivers, a combo like Drake London and Stephon Diggs, a combo like CeeDee Lamb and a lesser running back that is strictly a stash, like Tyler Algier or Bashal Tootin, someone that's unusable right now, but could have value in the second half of the season. I'm trying to get off Chase for 2 starters immediately, and now is the time to do that. And then finally, I want to discuss what's happening with the Cleveland Browns, because there are a lot of moving pieces, but at least for their schedule, it paints a horrific picture. Because the Browns, think about it, had that big game on the road in Green Bay a few weeks ago, right? Then they come back and they are hosting the Lions at home, get beat up, go on the road then because they were on the road in Detroit. They then go on the road to London last week. They lose a close one. And now they're going on the road again to Pittsburgh. So it's not just 3 travel spots. It's also 3 spots in which in between they went out of the country. It just doesn't bode well at all. Not only for, the offense that has become what it is with Dillon Gabriel, which is just trying to move the sticks, but not being explosive whatsoever. It's just a miserable schedule as well for Cleveland in a spot we expect them to fail drastically with the Steelers coming off of a bye week instead. Horrific scheduling. But I do want to say the 2 players that I will have faith in among the Browns, one, Quinshon Judkins, who, if not even having faith for the matchup, it's at least a spot where we've seen now Quinshon Judkins be trusted the last 2 weeks for at least 80% of the team's backfield touches. He's a voluminous RB2, even in a bad spot. So you start him. But also David Njoku got the biggest bump from Dillon Gabriel last week. It was not only a season-high target share from Gabriel for 28% mark for David Njoku, but also the fact that Gabriel, and again, being a game manager, not anyone exciting, he targeted tight ends on 41% of his throws, the second highest rate in the league. So we expect that to continue, and perhaps Njoku has become Gabriel's favorite target as well, amid him only targeting tight ends basically. So do have a lot of faith in Njoku. I get much higher on him rest of season for as long as Gabriel is under center. And right now, the Browns don't even have a backup quarterback named. So it's Gabriel for the foreseeable future, which helps Njoku. Okay. Let's get into some of these questions that don't have to be start-sit, but they're always start-sit. And as always, if I can't answer them because their injury reports are too much, I'll just gloss over them. Because especially with guys who play on Sunday, there's no need to answer a start-sit on a Friday. It just hurts both of us. It's irresponsible. But maybe we can navigate some of the injury situations and answer these. So, RB room is a mess, Doug W. says. And he needs to pick 3. Between Tony Pollard, Michael Carter, Zach Charbonnet, and Hassan Haskins, Kamani Vidal. Okay, so let's talk about the Chargers running back situation for a second, because it's not good. But it's probably, not even guaranteed, it's probably going to be one of Hassan Haskins or Kamani Vidal that emerges, maybe. And my early pick, with no other information, is Hassan Haskins, if only because he's the early down runner there, and early down running between the tackles. That's the same kind of trait that the Dolphins have struggled against all year, including last week, Rico Dowdle. Just strictly a power runner between the tackles, gets over 200 yards, as the Dolphins have struggled to stop the run all season long. Not to mention that you really can't look back at the splits from last year in the month that J.K. Dobbins missed, because when he was out those 4 games, Haskins only got 1 carry to Vidal's 20. But that's also because Gus Edwards was there. And obviously, Gus Edwards is the profile that blocks Haskins. He doesn't block Vidal since Vidal's projects as a third down back to catch targets. So in this case, I'm just copy-pasting Haskins' workload from Gus Edwards, and that I don't expect it to be efficient. But if there is a player to emerge from that backfield, I do believe it's Haskins. So, having said that, the 3 you pick, I believe, are Tony Pollard, who I want to get off of. I'm definitely looking to trade as Tajay Spears' workload continues to increase. But it's still only the second game activated from injured reserve from the high ankle sprain. And last week we saw in his first game only 4 touches. I'm not worried about Tajay Spears' workload yet cutting dramatically into Tony Pollard's workload. So I'll still start Tony Pollard. I'll start Michael Carter, who we actually think his workload can increase in this game because 74% of the team's backfield touches with a 17% target share. But that was also in a game that Amari DiMercato basically got sent to the doghouse for fumbling, dropping, whatever at the goal line, which the worst part about what Deshaun Jackson did, what A.D. Mitchell did a couple weeks ago, and what DiMercato did this past game and dropping the ball at the plane is that it's not even a cool celebration. It's actually probably the worst touchdown celebration you could think of, to just drop the ball. And yet they literally dropped the ball before scoring that touchdown. So at least think of something cool if you're not going to score the touchdown. Dropping the ball is like the worst idea possible. No one cares. So we don't expect DiMercato to handle a lot of touches anymore, similar to A.D. Mitchell, who only ran 2 routes, and instead the Colts pushed up Ashton Dulin on the depth chart to tie Michael Pittman in routes run. We expect something similar to happen to DiMercato. And if that's the case, then we can continue to lean on Michael Carter despite the matchup. Just also worse than Quinshon Judkins, but similar in that he's a touch-based RB2-3. And then I will take Haskins over Charbonnet because of the matchup. And we've obviously seen both Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet be RB3s. They can't even be declared as top 24 running backs because all they do is cannibalize each other in touches. And then Charbonnet is the one that's used inside the red zone and 10-yard line over Walker. So you have touchdown upside with Charbonnet. But I think the matchup is better for Haskins and also a committee. I'll take the matchup in Haskins over Charbonnet. Because also we know what we're getting with Charbonnet. There's at least some unknown in Haskins' role. And volatility could go either direction, could be bad, but they're so close, Haskins and Charbonnet, I'm going to take the unknown and just suck it up and say, who cares if I'm wrong? I'm going to take Haskins over Charbonnet. All right. Start one between Jameson Williams, Calvin Ridley, Troy Franklin. That's easy. It's Jameson Williams. I don't even care about the usage for Jameson Williams so far. We are talking about a 53-point total in what is absolutely expected to be a shootout, given that the Lions are going to be without 2 starting cornerbacks and potentially both starting safeties. The Chiefs are going to have no problem moving the ball down the field, especially through the air, and it's going to create fireworks. And so that kind of environment with a player who, even if he does see just 2 targets, can win your league with one of those targets very easily. I'm not going to get too cute. I'm just going to start Jameson Williams. Hopefully he gets more volume. But even if not, the matchup's so good that I don't care. We're just going to take a chance on Jameson Williams. Daniel Whitmore asks, Mason, which I'm assuming is Jordan Mason, Jameson Williams, or Bill Krosky-Merritt. He has a stacked league, and so a stacked roster. And so Jameson Williams is wide receiver 5 or 6. Totally fine. If that's the case, I'm still going to lean on Jordan Mason, who against the Browns a couple of weeks ago overseas, that was his toughest matchup to date by far. And shockingly, it didn't even matter for him. Not only do you still see a season-high target share without Aaron Jones, but Jordan Mason, let's look at what he finished in that game. Week 4, Jordan Mason still finished against a Browns defense that basically shut out every other running back involved. Was it week 5? No, it was week 4. I'm going to guess he was a top 12 back, which is not, let's see here. Which is not what the Browns allowed Chase Brown, Derrick Henry, and Josh Jacobs and David Montgomery to be. No, he was not top 12. 3 catches. Okay. Way outside. Top 36 in a tough matchup. So RB 35. So basically either an RB2 or flex option for everyone. But that's fine. We're expecting something similar So I will go Jordan Mason in this spot. I want to talk about Ja'Cory Kroski-Merritt just for a second, just because we got season highs across the board, but also it was a favorable game script, and that Kroski-Merritt should have been used like that since he has been proven through the first 4 games to be their early down runner. But if there's it's in Washington's range of outcomes to fall behind early against the Bears. And if that were the case, I don't expect Kroski-Merritt to be like the third down back and guy they play in catch up. That's still Jeremy McNichols' role. But just the fact that in that game last week, we got numbers that can all be increased on. We got Kroski-Merritt playing 48% of snaps, easily can play more. 70% of the running back carries, could easily handle more. 70% of their running back touches, could handle more. A 38% route participation, because again, he's not the pass catching back, but that could increase. And then an 8.5% target share, all season high marks, the numbers I just said, by the way. I don't expect those to just copy paste every week, but I do think this is the runway Kroski-Merritt needed for the team to have confidence in him. And so rest of season, he's a player to be very, very high on and even buy high. But I don't think that translates to a week 6 conversation where he's now suddenly an every down back. No. So I'm not afraid to bench Kroski-Merritt if I have a better situation, but I love having him on my roster. So Mason for me. Assuming, again, is that it has to be Mason Taylor, right? Because Jordan Mason is on bye. So if that's the case, I'm going to start Jameson Williams over Kroski-Merritt. But yeah, I'm assuming you meant Mason Taylor. So we had a conversation over Jordan Mason for nothing. Wonderful. Rashik Barron asked, Mason Taylor, Darren Waller, Travis Kelce. It's going to be Darren Waller, but it is a terrible matchup, I'll say. But the other 5, Mason Taylor, for example, target shares increased in every game. But the last 2 weeks for him have also been easy matchups, so you just kind of expected it. Against tight ends, for example, let's see here. Dallas and Miami, both below average in catches and yards per game allowed to tight ends. So again, 2 easy matchups. Whereas the Broncos allow yards, but they're not the best matchup. But Darren Waller, the fact he's being used specifically in the red zone, so he also has much more touchdown upside than Mason Taylor. Although the Chargers have been one of the league's best defenses against tight ends, they rank, for example, 27th in catches per game allowed to tight ends. We're not playing Darren Waller for the usage. We're playing Darren Waller for the touchdowns. And Mason Taylor, in his toughest competition in the last month, I'm just going to try and chase the touchdowns instead. So I'm going to take Darren Waller. Next question comes from the Demarino. Doug, I don't know who Doug is. I don't know who Doug is. So let's just say Pollard, Carter, or Charb. If I had to pick one, I'm going to go. Would I go Tony Pollard or Michael Carter? I think I would go Michael Carter now that Kyler Williams has been ruled as active. Judkins or Skattebo rest of season? That's a great question. I guess for the environment, I'm going to go Skattebo rest of season. Judkins could handle a higher workload, but he'll perpetually be in the worst offense because no one's showing up at quarterback to save that offense. So I'm going to go Skattebo rest of season. Rashik Barron asks, Stafford in the rain or Josh in the dome? I know you're not talking about Josh Allen. You don't deserve to have Josh Allen on your roster, Rashik, if you're asking me a Josh Allen question about whether to start or sit him. Stafford is like cute. Don't get me wrong. Like he's available on waiver wires and you can pick him up and start him. But also he's a pocket passer who doesn't offer rushing upside. And the matchup is so good against the Ravens that it could easily just be Kyren Williams who scores all the touchdowns and Stafford doesn't need a throw. Like the last 2 games that allowed Stafford to actually be usable in fantasy were indoor matchup, competitive environment against one of the best offenses in the league in the Colts, and falling behind early, a divisional matchup indoors against the Rams. Now we're talking about outdoors on the road against Cooper Rush. Like it's not exciting at all. We're only playing Stafford because the opposing defense is bad. And don't get me wrong, it's a great matchup. But if Stafford had 150 yards and 1 touchdown, it would not be shocking at all because the Ravens can't push the Rams whatsoever in their current state. They're one of, if not the worst offense in the league with Cooper Rush engineering the offense. So it's quite easily Josh Allen. That's not even a question. Stafford, again, high floor, but not going to be surprised at all if he doesn't reach his ceiling. It's all in the range of outcomes. 300 yards and 4 touchdowns before the Rams blow out the Ravens is in the range of outcomes. But also Kyren Williams and Blake Corum having 2 touchdowns each, that could happen, and that sucks away from Stafford. So you'd only be playing for the matchup. Otherwise, no one wanted to play Stafford a couple weeks ago. Let's see here. Start Mason Taylor or Hunter Henry. That's easily Hunter Henry. Again, Mason Taylor has benefited from a couple good matches the past couple weeks, but when we're talking about him against other top 12 or actual top 12 tight ends, that's not a conversation. You just start the actual top 12 tight end over Mason Taylor, who's just benefited from the good matchups. Very cool to see his target share increase in both games, but this is his toughest matchup to date, and he's not a player that you're weighing against other, tight end ones. For Drake May and the Patriots especially, it's a great matchup because May is only one of 4 quarterbacks completing 80% of his passes from a clean pocket. The Saints obviously are 31st in creating pressure, so we expect Drake May to have an easy time. Saints also have allowed multiple touchdown passes to every quarterback this year. And when facing a rushing quarterback, Kyler Murray got 38 rushing yards, Josh Allen got 45 yards and a touchdown, and Jackson Dart got 55 yards last week. So Drake May and all the Patriots are amazing starts this week against New Orleans. Fudd Gumslow, Gumslover, that's what it is, ask, is DeMarcado droppable? And he says he would drop DeMarcado for Coker. And it's all relative. DeMarcado is droppable like in 10-team leagues. Deeper benches, you can still keep him because if Michael Carter were injured, then naturally the touches would then go to DeMarcado, especially because on the play that Jonathan Gannon, head coach, was so upset about, remember, it was still a 70-plus yard run. That's what DeMarcado brings, whereas Michael Carter wasn't explosive at all. Michael Carter was actually bad. But when you get all the touches, like Chase Brown, it doesn't matter. You just start him. So 2.8 yards per carry for Carter. Bam Knight has 2 plays of 10-plus yards. DeMarcado has a 70-plus yard run that should have been a touchdown. DeMarcado would get all the touches. But if it's a shallower league and you're weighing the options, you can probably drop DeMarcado. That probably means that other contingency players are available. I keep all of the contingency players ranked at Establish the Run in the 1 injury away column for questions like this. So they're all ranked there if you go check it out. I would be fine picking up Jalen Coker. I don't have high of hopes for Coker as a lot of people do. First of all, Bryce Young is struggling to support Ted McMillan, Tetaroa. And so, then we have to step back and ask ourselves, how can Bryce Young possibly support Tetaroa and Jalen Coker. I have my doubts he can. And so, like, Jalen Coker coming back is fine, but you're also not starting him this week if he's active because, like we've seen with Chris Godwin, you don't start players who are injured coming back in their first game. You just ignore it. And so now we're probably looking at a couple weeks to start Jalen Coker. And even then, we don't know if we can start him because we expect Bryce Young to continue struggling. So you can pick up Coker. That's fine. Because there are, I believe, better contingency players available on your waiver wire. It's all relative. Drop Godwin and Tootin 10-man. I don't think so yet. I don't hate dropping Godwin, but I'm not there yet. Just in case. He could come back in a couple of weeks with Mike Evans. He could get moved into the slot whenever it's Evans, Egbuka, and Godwin, who have historically, Godwin been much better from the slot. So I'm not going to drop him just yet. And Tootin, I don't want to drop, but I understand there are many injuries across the league. And Tootin has no standalone value. So although I think he's one of the best stashes for the second half of the year and the best contingency player if the starter were injured, that also could amount to absolutely nothing. So if you're in a situation where you have to drop Tootin, that's fine. You can do it. There's a player in your league probably who has a strong top-heavy roster and spots on their benches that will pick them up because they can afford to stash them. But I understand not everyone can afford to have any stash, let alone one that is not providing anything weekly, which is what Tootin is right now. So totally fine to drop him. Kendrick Bourne or Matthew Golden, and that comes down to the availabilities of Jawan Jennings and Ricky Pearsall. If both are out, Kendrick Bourne, you should start him over Matthew Golden. If Pearsall's out, which it sounds like for sure, and Jennings is active, I would still start Bourne over Golden for sure. It's a great spot for Mac Jones and the 49ers offense once again. Without Jamel Dean, starting cornerback, on the field last year, the Bucs allowed 8.3 yards per attempt, which was a league low mark. And in 79 snaps with Dean off the field this year, the Bucs have allowed 7.6 yards per attempt, which is 26th. Let's look at the Bucs injury report. Let's see if Jamel Dean's going to play. Because if so, I want to play all the 49ers. Or if not, I want to play all the 49ers. Jamel Dean practiced in full yesterday, so that means he's probably going to start. That sucks. All right, just go Matthew Golden. Matthew Golden over Kendrick Bourne, assuming Jawan Jennings is playing, is fine. If Jennings and Pearsall are out, go Kendrick Bourne. Flex 1, Breece Hall, Travis Etienne, or Cortland Sutton, and it's going to be Breece Hall. Seahawks run defense, very good. Rachaad White got there with the 2 touchdowns receiving last week. Or he got there with 2 touchdowns, but one was receiving. But Breece Hall, we saw without Braylon Allen now, he out-touched Isaiah Davis 33-8 since Braylon Allen left against the Cowboys in the first quarter. It's all Breece Hall's backfield. And so I'll happily take that for every touch receiving back, even though Cortland Sutton's also, like, obviously a very good play. Travis Etienne's a very good play. You have a good team. You have to sit 2 good players. I'm going to start Breece Hall among them. Drop Ollie Gordon for Torrey Orton or Malik Washington. All right, just a lot of stuff here. You could drop Ollie Gordon, who is only spelling Devon Achane, but is not actually getting carries inside the 10-yard line or playing enough to matter. Like, he's clearly Achane's contingency player, the backup. but he provides nothing beyond that. So I will happily drop Ollie Gordon for Rashid Shaheed, who is in another good spot this week. For example, like we called with Shaheed last week, it's pretty easy to see the games in which he breaks out because he has massive splits depending on the coverage. Let's see here where he's ranked. Against man coverage, for example, Shaheed is 20th in yards per route run with 36% of his targets, which is 9th among all receivers. Against zone, though, Shaheed is 48th in yards per route run and has only seen, oh boy, he's way down, 76th, 12.5% of his targets against zone. And the Patriots, with Christian Gonzalez healthy the last couple of games, have had more confidence to play more man coverage at a top 5 rate. So I do think it's another predictable and terrific matchup for Rashid Shaheed in a game we expect to be a shootout between the Saints and Patriots indoors. Rashik asks, is Woody Marks the RB1 for the Texans? And is the Steelers' backfield at a 50-50 split? Okay. So, Woody Marks is the RB1 for the Texans, but it fluctuates, right? It was a favorable game script against the worst team in the league with Cooper Rush without Lamar Jackson. And so it's almost like a blow-off game for the Texans. So much so that they got Dameon Pierce involved, who they never even care to give a carry because Dameon Pierce doesn't matter for that offense. So I'm not personally worried about Woody Marks at all. Like, it would have been great to see the trajectory be lead Nick Chubb in touches as the RB6 in week 4, and then in week 5, dominate. That didn't happen. Nick Chubb out-touched him. I don't personally care. We're coming from off of a bye, and when the going gets tough, when the Texans play competitive matchups, which the Ravens are not and were not, they're going to put the ball in their best player's hands, and their best player is Woody Marks, as they showed us a couple weeks ago. The trend was happening for Marks. We talked about it every single week leading up to week 4. It happens in week 4. We get the rug pulled in week 5. I don't care. It's obviously Woody Marks who is the RB1 here, and will get the ball more moving forward. So, especially when the Texans are in competitive games. So, not worried about Woody Marks at all. And for the Steelers, I don't know. I genuinely don't know what's going to happen after Kenneth Gainwell had a very successful outing for the Steelers in Dublin a couple weeks ago. It was trending towards Jaylen Warren handling every touch for the Steelers. Go back to the week 3 Q&A I did, where we even talk about buying Warren low to get ahead of him handling every workload for Pittsburgh. Every touch for Pittsburgh. But then you could say he suffered the knee injury ahead of week 4 because in week 3 he handled a career high 80% of the team's backfield touches. Maybe being a smaller back who had never handled all the touches before, maybe that workload is what injured him. And the Steelers see that and now understand they need to use Kenneth Gainwell more. Maybe that's not the case at all. It's a wide range of outcomes for Jaylen Warren, which is why I don't have an answer for you. I have no idea if it's a timeshare or not officially. But it could be. I still don't mind starting Jaylen Warren as an RB3 this week. So wherever necessary, wherever you have buys and injuries. But it could be a mix of results that we just don't know what's going to happen. Jose Rodriguez asked the same thing. Franklin, Shaheed, Downs, Orton, Bonds. You're picking up Shaheed for all the reasons I mentioned earlier. Garrett or Olave, flex PPR. And in the matchup against Pat Surtain, Here's the thing. Garrett Wilson has a higher ceiling than Chris Olave, who's used more as a possession receiver, which is why like everyone cites the targets and the air yards that they don't matter. It's for Chris Olave, he's not a ceiling player. He's a possession receiver. So like he has a higher floor. And I expect Olave to outscore Garrett Wilson. But Garrett Wilson will have a higher target share, and there are enough fluky things that happen in 60 minutes of football where Wilson could outscore Olave on one target. So I'm going to start Olave. I'll say Olave. But Wilson has the higher ceiling. But I'm going to start Olave. Pick 2, Alexi asked, between Jawan Jennings, Quentin Johnston, Michael Carter, and Chase Brown, I'm going to go the 2 receivers and Jawan Jennings and Quentin Johnston. We've seen now, it's only been 43 routes together, but Jawan Jennings has 40% of the team's targets without Pearsall on the field this year. He's a wide receiver 1 when he plays for the Niners. I'm not going to bench that, assuming he's active. I'm going to definitely play Jawan Jennings. And also for Quentin Johnston, it was flop lag. The pendulum swung a different direction for the Chargers' targets. But he was consistent enough. He showed us enough in the first 4 games that we still have faith he is the wide receiver 1 or 2 for the Chargers in a terrific matchup for Justin Herbert and that offense, assuming they're not pressured. Justin Herbert, for example, in this game, Miami is blitzing on 40% of opposing dropbacks, second highest rate in the league. And without Joe Walt the past couple of weeks, Herbert has been bad against the blitz. 28th in yards per attempt, 24th in completion rate. But the Dolphins have also just been an offense that you can do whatever you want against. So it really just comes down to when the Dolphins blitz, are they going to be able to pressure Justin Herbert? Because if they do, that's bad news for everyone. But if they don't reach Herbert, which is a question we can't ask in a start-sit question, that's really comes down to only Sunday in the game, then Herbert's going to have a good day. And I'll at least take the chance that Herbert's going to have a good day. So I can see both outcomes to where it's also very bad for the Chargers offense like it was last week. We talked about, didn't want to start Herbert because he's been terrible under pressure and the Commanders are create pressure. The Dolphins are going to try to, but they really haven't had success reaching quarterback. So I'll take a chance on Quentin Johnston. Need a flex for this week between Gainwell, no. Haskins or Flournoy, no. It's just Hassan Haskins, Tyler Shooter. Gainwell, the range of outcomes are too wide to start him. Like it could be 3 touches, it could be 12, and we don't know. So we're not going to take that chance. Flournoy, I hope Flournoy is a player that sticks around for the Cowboys. He's really fun. Coming out in 2023, he had the best 3-cone drill as the most agile receiver in that entire class at the combine. And also, like, he was a freak athlete in college as well. Flournoy, for example, in college, let's see here. Bench 350 pounds, power clean 325, squatted 5'10. Ceiling athlete. But also, we can zoom out and say he was only good. He only popped up out of nowhere for this one game to match Jake Ferguson in target share because of what the Broncos allow. Like, wide receiver 2s against the Broncos who have had success because the targets typically go away from the wide receiver 1 are Calvin Austin across from DK Metcalf, 4 catches for 70 yards and a touchdown. Emeka Egbuka across from Mike Evans, 6 for 85. And then Flournoy had 6 for 114. Like, I see the start sits popping up about Troy Franklin. And yeah, he's in a fine matchup. But also the questions we're asking about start this guy or Troy Franklin, relative, Troy Franklin's not a good start compared to those options. So Troy Franklin's like a sneaky deep sleeper, but when you have a top 24 wide receiver, things like that, you're not worried about starting Troy Franklin. So for this case, it's definitely Hassan Haskins over the rest of those guys. Albert's Corner asks, Iomanor or Bond? And I'm going to go Iomanor and hope the Titans figured out something in that fourth quarter in allowing Cam Ward to throw different routes 10 yards downfield. Maybe they didn't, and Iomanor just goes right back to the bench. But we're talking about the matchup, Dylan Gabriel or Cam Ward, in what could be a shootout against the Raiders. Raiders lead the league in zone coverage. Iomanor could find a pocket there. I'll split hairs and go Iomanor. Jawan Flith asks Mason Taylor or Kyle Pitts, and because Darnell Mooney, well, let's make sure here. Darnell Mooney missed another practice. And is day-to-day still. But he plays Monday night. All right, so we don't have to answer right now. So basically, on Sunday, Jawan, if Darnell Mooney is trending towards being out, start Kyle Pitts. If Darnell Mooney is playing, start Mason Taylor. There you go. Chance Cunningham asks, Kendry Miller, Ramondre Stevenson, T. Higgins, or Romeo Doubs. If Alvin Kamara's out, you're starting Kendry Miller. If not, you're starting Ramondre Stevenson, since it's now a two-headed backfield with Antonio Gibson out for the year. But if Kamara's out, I'm starting Kendry Miller over Ramondre Stevenson. We're not going to know that, though, until Sunday. Michael De La Torre asked, if Jennings starts, would you play Bourne or Shaheed? If Jennings starts, I think I'd play Shaheed. If Jennings is out, I would play Bourne. But I think there's enough targets to go around with Jennings back in the lineup where obviously Kendrick Bourne is not gonna lead the team in targets. Romeo Doubs or Kendrick Bourne, same thing. If Jennings is out, Bourne. If Jennings is in, I'm starting Romeo Doubs. Doubs is in an amazing matchup this week. Bengals allowing the 9th most fantasy points to wide receivers from out wide, and Doubs leads the team in end zone targets since Jaden Reed got injured as well. Andrew asks a trade question. Kamara, Chase Brown, T. Higgins, Ridley. There's too much to process here, Andrew. But I'll take the QJ and Christian McCaffrey side. There's a lot to process, but you're getting the two best players in that deal. It's pretty easily Quentin Johnson, Christian McCaffrey. Jake, start 3. George Pickens, Drake London, McBride, and Tyler Warren. Standard league, but tight end is full PPR. So basically a tight end premium. I will start McBride, Warren, and I think Drake London. But maybe let me look at my rankings real quick. Because if Mooney plays, okay, now it's going to be George Pickens over Drake London. So, McBride, Warren, George Pickens. Yeah. Start K-Dot or Mason Taylor? Mason Taylor. We're not going to start K-Dot. He popped up last week, but he was running around on 87% of dropbacks before then. No one wanted to even pick him up. So, better waiver grab, Hunt or Vidal? It's still Vidal. Just because Kareem Hunt, Like he scores 2 touchdowns, but otherwise he's available for a reason, right? It's a 3-headed committee with Brashad Smith working in on passing downs. You're literally, if you start Hunt, you have to get a touchdown. Otherwise, he offers nothing. So at least with Vidal, there's an unknown outcome. And that could be bad, but that could be good. So we're going to take the unknown rather than settling on Kareem Hunt. Bing Bong asked Travion Henderson or Hassan Haskins. And Haskins probably going to out-touch him. But in being a 2-headed timeshare, I'll still take the chance on Travion Henderson, hoping he gets more touches. Mason Taylor or Harold Fannin. I'll take Mason Taylor. Harold Fannin, we talked about why it was a good matchup last week. Not as great of a matchup this week. So easily Mason Taylor. Kenneth Walker or Lad McConkey. And I'm going to take McConkey. Again, hoping the target share, that's the beginning of a trend and leading the team in targets. Maybe it's not for him last week, but we know Kenneth Walker's in a committee and we know Charbonnet gets used in the 10-yard line more than anyone would like. So I'm going to take McConkey, who may even have higher touchdown upside than Walker. Albert asks, I'm loaded up at top. Who can I drop? You're talking about, when you're speaking of Bashal Tootin, Brian Robinson Jr., Blake Corum, Woody Marks, Trey Benson. Lots of contingency options, but Brian Robinson Jr. is clearly the guy you can drop. Just because if Christian McCaffrey were injured, as Brian Robinson showed us in Washington for his career, he's not the pass catching back. He's not the guy who handles every touch because he doesn't run routes. So it would be a combination of Isaac Garindo and Brian Robinson if Christian McCaffrey were injured, whereas the other individuals project to handle a majority of their team's touches. So I don't stash Brian Robinson anywhere because I think Isaac Garindo could probably just outscore him. Zeb, you're asking me an IDP question, but I don't know. I don't play IDP. So honestly, I'm not sure. But if you ask me who has more success, which defense, I would guess it's TJ Watt and the Steelers against the Browns, given the schedule mishap I answered earlier. Rashik asked, will Chuba Hubbard still be fantasy relevant when he returns? And I believe it's going to be closer to a timeshare. One, because you obviously just can't have 200 yards rushing and then go back to the bench. That doesn't happen. Not to mention, they've been trying to take Chuba Hubbard off the field on passing downs in favor of Dowdle this entire time. So Dowdle at least has a higher floor, and that's going to take away from Chuba Hubbard's ceiling whenever Hubbard returns. Hubbard will be, I think Dowdle, whenever Hubbard returns, it'll be like the poor man's version of Walker and Charbonnet, in that they are less efficient, far less efficient. But for bye weeks, you'll probably be forced to start one of them as an RB3 or 4. But Hubbard definitely loses value as an RB2 moving forward. Christopher Sowers asks, since he has Puka and Adams, should he start Daniels or Stafford? But Puka and Adams do not. Those are two separate questions because you have two good players, but they don't correlate in that you should then start Stafford. You can start Puka and Adams, and you can start the better quarterback in Jayden Daniels because he offers a rushing floor. So you're starting Jayden Daniels over Matthew Stafford. Is it better to chase the ceiling, JP asked, of a boom-bust wide receiver like Jameson Williams over someone like Jawan Jennings, who isn't at 100%, but will get targets if they're in the game? It honestly just comes down to your own risk tolerance, which is why start questions are always hard. Like I don't mind sucking it up and like going through my process, and what happens. And if a player gets outscored, I genuinely don't care because I do the process and let the results always fall where they may. I am numb to this at this point, so I do not mind if I'm wrong. just because I know I did the process leading up to Sunday that made me do those start sits. That led me to that decision. So it's going to be your own risk tolerance, because when you say like, yeah, boom bust, Jameson Williams has one catch, could have one catch for sure, but also he could have 100 yards and a touchdown. So is that better than someone like Juwan Jennings? I have the same start sit in a couple of my leagues. I don't know where I'm going yet. Matthew Golden is not boom or bust. Matthew Golden is like basically just bust at this point. Again, we need to see him earn more targets. So I don't even include him in this conversation. But Jameson Williams or Juwan Jennings, both good matchups. I guess I'd probably start Jameson Williams this week. In another week, if Juwan Jennings is fully healthy, probably not. But when thinking about it, I think I just start Jameson Williams this week. And that way you don't got to worry about it. If Kamara is out, start Kendre Miller, Travion Henderson, or Josh. It's very easily Kendre Miller. Chase Brown or Hassan Haskins. It's still Chase Brown, unfortunately. But Chase Brown is still getting 75% of the team's touches with Jake Browning in the game. Joe Flacco now there. At least the Browns had the 7th highest target rate to running backs with Joe Flacco. So hopefully Chase Brown gets some more catches, but his ceiling is kaput. Should I trade Jalen Waddle, Kendre Miller, and Jalen Warren for Saquon and Jacoby Myers? Yes, that's fine. Because you're getting the worst receiver and Jacoby Myers behind Jalen Waddle. You're getting the best player in the trade for Saquon Barkley when the rest of those guys, Kendre Miller, Jalen Warren, they're plug and play options. They're not really someone you're worried about. Better play in DFS, Kendrick Bourne or Juwan Jennings? Definitely Juwan Jennings, because the ownership always decreases whenever a player's coming back from injury, even though we don't know if he's like actually injured. We believe he's injured, right? But we don't know the extent of that injury. What if he's coming back and he's 90%? And then you're not worried at all. Not to mention the splits I talked about earlier with Juwan Jennings still soaking up all the targets without Ricky Pearsall, who's not playing on the field. So Juwan Jennings is far and away the better DFS play on Yahoo DFS than Kendrick Bourne. Angel asks, trade question. JSN and Kenneth Walker for Bijan. I don't think I'd do that. It obviously depends on your roster, because maybe like you have 4 other good receivers that JSN you're starting every week, but if you lost JSN, you'd be totally fine. And so if that's the case, I would do it for Bijan. But on the surface, I'm at least saying JSN's a top 3 wide receiver every week. And Kenneth Walker has contingency upside that we're waiting on, that if Zach Charbonnet were injured, Kenneth Walker is then a top 5, top 8 running back. And I'd rather have those 2 pieces than Bijan just on the surface of this question. But if you have 4 strong wide receivers where you don't even need JSN, then sure, I would trade for Bijan. All right, we're cutting it close. About a minute left here, so let's go rapid fire. Need to sit one. Walker, Warren, cross-scheme Merritt, ETN. I think in this case, I would sit Walker. It has to be Walker or ETN. I'm just going to let my rankings aside. How about that? Because they're all close. That's why you're asking the question, because they're all close. And I said Walker, and I think I have, what's the other one? Cross-scheme Merritt. Yeah, I have Walker the lowest. Walker's my RB24. So I am sitting Walker among that group. Would you sell Chase for Rashee Rice? I absolutely would. I absolutely would try to buy Rashee Rice wherever. And Chase, I think you can do Chase for Rashee Rice and another player, even if it's a stash tack on, like Bashal Tutin. But yes, you can trade Chase for Rice. That's a package on how to get Rice. And then last one, Harrison Lynn asks, Caleb Williams or Drake May? Drake May is the QB4 in points per game. I already talked about the shootout that's going to happen because the Saints can't get pressure, and Drake May's been amazing without pressure this year. But amazing in general, not to mention the rushing floor. So I think it's quite easily, although Caleb Williams is the QB6 in points per game and an amazing start and shouldn't be available in one quarterback's leagues anywhere. He should be started over Matthew Stafford even because the rushing floor in a great matchup. But Drake May has ascended, especially if they're a big win with the Bills, and is looking like the steal of fantasy football. With that being said, remember, you can find me at NotJDaigle on Twitter, and I'll be back here on You with Yahoo next week. Those stash rankings are also at established to run for everybody. So until next week, good luck in week 6. And remember, be a little bit kinder to what's required. I'll see you next time.